お酒が好きですか? Do you like alcohol? いいえ、好きじゃありません. No, I don't like alcohol. So what kind of situation is this? It's probably like you're talking to somebody you don't know very well, like somebody you just met, and you don't have much information about them. And in this context, we wouldn't use ga because it kind of sounds like, oh, you like alcohol, don't you? And people be like, why are you making that assumption? Do you think I drink every day to forget that my crush told me he hates me? So that's pretty weird, and the most neutral way of asking this question is お酒好きですか? Do you like alcohol? Without using any particles between お酒 and 好き. And this is a pretty common way of bringing up a new topic without any prior context. And a lot of people have this overly simplistic understanding of particles, like there's always one correct particle and native speakers just drop it. But particles don't work like that. It's not as simple as that. Particles have different meanings, including no particles. If you want to understand the actual Japanese as opposed to kind of like a special purpose language that textbooks teach you, the kind of language that's specifically created for learners, it's more practical to understand non-particles as a kind of particle. So not using particles isn't always a simple matter of omission. And context and meanings matter a lot. For example, in a different context, like a formal interview, we might use wa and say, お酒は好きですか? Do you like alcohol? But if you think about the kind of situation where you'd ask somebody if they like alcohol, it's probably not super formal. But we also use wa for contrasting. For example, I'm gonna use タバコを吸う to smoke a cigarette and say タバコ吸いますか? Do you smoke? 吸いません. No, I don't. じゃあ、お酒は好きですか? Then, do you like alcohol? And here I'm using wa like then how about alcohol? And another common particle here is te, which is very colloquial, and we use it very often in conversation. So, お酒って好きですか? Do you like alcohol? And te kind of softens the sentence like, oh, by the way, do you like alcohol? Or do you like alcohol by any chance? And in Japanese, we love softening sentences. But in this kind of situation, ga is a very unlikely particle, which doesn't mean we never say ga suki. We do, but in different situations. For example, if you use words like nani, what, donna, what kind, we'd use ga. So you can say, どんなお酒が好きですか? What kind of alcoholic beverage do you like? And as usual, I asked other native speakers about this to make sure that this is not just my opinion, and one of them came up with this situation where we would say が好き. For example, you assume that your colleague is a healthy person, so you offer them a smoothie. Like, do you want a smoothie? No, not really. Do you want some tea? Not really. Then you might use もしかして by any chance and say もしかしてお酒が好きですか? Wait a minute, do you actually like alcohol by any chance? And here, ga works because you kind of made an assumption that this person might like alcohol. So it's kind of like, okay, you don't like smoothies, you don't like tea. Oh, is it actually the alcohol that you like? So that's the vibe. So there could be very specific situations where we would use ga, but as a beginner, it's not the most relevant particle because as a neutral question with no prior context, we wouldn't use ga. And this is such a common textbook particle, not just Minna no Nihongo, but also with other textbooks like Genki. I did a lot of research. I've asked at least 15 other native speakers. I've also searched my collection of unscripted spoken Japanese. I've also used public corpora to confirm that people don't say this. I've used Google search. I've checked pretty serious grammar books like these written for native speakers. And I've also looked for research papers, and I've actually found this one that explains why ga doesn't fit in this context. So there's quite substantial research behind this video. And I've also found very specific situations where you would say が好きですか? For example, this one. 皆さんはテストが好きですか? And in this sentence, adding は and say 皆さんは, 皆さん means everybody. That kind of makes が sound okay. And my theory is that in a very short sentence like テスト好きですか? Do you like tests? adding a particle can make a huge impact. But if a sentence has several different particles, excluding the ending ka, the question particle, excluding that, if it already has other particles like wa, maybe the impact of a single particle kind of like decreases. But this is just my opinion. Another interesting example I found is this questionnaire that uses 会社が好きですか? Do you like your company? And I think this sounds okay, partly because the context of this questionnaire, because the only people who are answering this are people who work for a company. So the context implies that you already work for the company. So that kind of context makes it okay. And another possible reason is that this is a written question, which is different from like a natural conversational question because the way we write Japanese is different from the way we speak Japanese. But even as a survey question, は好きですか is way more common. So when you look for examples, it's very important to think of the exact context, especially with particles because particles are very, very context sensitive. So unless you're Mike Miller, who only lives in the textbook where people speaking fill in the blank questions, you really have to think of the exact situation. Now let's move on to the next sentence. いいえ、好きじゃありません. Because this also sounds pretty unnatural, to the point that I can say we would probably never say this, at least unironically. First of all, in a natural everyday conversation, we would say いや or いえ to say no. So we don't normally say いいえ. And 好きじゃありません is much less common in everyday conversation than 好きじゃないです. So a more natural way of saying this is いや、あんま好きじゃないです. No, I don't really like it. And I added あんま not a lot because in this kind of like negative statement, we try to kind of like soften the sentence. And another possible response would be using 飲まない don't drink and say いや、あんま飲まないです. No, I don't drink a lot of alcohol. Or you can use 全然 not at all and say いや、全然飲まないです. No, I don't drink alcohol at all. And interesting is, two of the other native speakers I asked said that if a native speaker said, いいえ、好きじゃありません, it would sound a little bit like they're joking or they're being sarcastic because it's unnecessarily formal and unnatural. So if you want to speak Minna no Nihongo Japanese, be sure that they don't think you're very fluent in Japanese. You can probably add some Duolingo style mispronunciation just to be sure. But having said that, the question itself, お酒好きですか? Do you like alcohol? Is actually something that we say pretty often. It's like a typical, not so interesting small talk question. So if you run out of things to say with your less than enthusiastic Bumble date in Japan, you might go, お酒好きですか? Do you like alcohol? いや、あんま飲まないです. No, I don't drink a lot of alcohol. 私もあんま飲まないんですよ. No, I don't really drink a lot either. 居酒屋よりカフェの方が好きですね. I prefer cafes to 居酒屋. わかります. I can relate to that. 私もそうです. I'm the same way. And if you want to acquire natural and practical Japanese, consider joining my email group because I have both free and paid lessons where you can learn Japanese with natural and easy dialogues so that you don't run out of things to say with your Bumble date. So click on the link on the screen or in the description and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.